Welcome to Comics Bazaar, the channel of comics commentary and arcana. This video features Daredevil issue 195, cover dated June 1983. There is no cover caption here, there is no cover caption required. The cover is by Klaus Janson, pencils, inks, perhaps colors by him too. It's an intriguing one featuring Daredevil in costume and he's being attacked by NYPD riot police. So the billy club he uses to mete out vigilante justice is being turned on him by these NYPD police officers, and it seems to convey a theme perhaps of the limits of Daredevil's vigilanteism. How could he get into this predicament? Why would it be that the police are going after him, and why are they masked in the fashion that they are? So definitely one that catches the eye and one that intrigues the reader as regards what is the story within. Also, interesting techniques used by Klaus Janson, the compositional technique of having Daredevil in the center there surrounded by the cops, and also other techniques such as the screen tone for the jackets of the police officers and ink splash in the background and a color hold too. Let's open this one up to the first page. We get a splash page. There's 22 pages of story and art in this particular issue. The title of the story is Betrayal, and the creator credits are down here in the bottom corner. Story, Denny O'Neil. So Denny O'Neil, the editor now turned writer of the title. Art by Klaus Janson. So that is pencils, inks and colors by him. Letters by Joe Rosen. Colors by Glynis Wine. And you see there that there's a special editor credit for Linda Grant. That's because in this particular era, it was in the Jim Shooter era, that is, Jim Shooter would not allow writers to edit their own work. So if Denny O'Neil has become the writer of the title, having been editor, you need to have somebody editing him. And this is the stand-in for the minute. But note also in the creator credits box, special thanks to Alan Brennert. So Alan Brennert did that fantastic issue, that focus on Ben Urich in Daredevil 192, immediately after the end of Frank Miller's run. And the story is that Denny O'Neil was hoping that Alan Brennert would pitch another story or two for the title. And he pitched an idea that makes its way into this particular story. But, and when we get to it, I'll identify it, but not up front. But he had a dear friend who was suffering from leukemia at the time, and it created writer's block. So he wasn't able to finish scripting the issue. And so Denny O'Neil took over. And that's the reason why there's special thanks to Alan Brennert down here in the creator credits. So what is the scene here? Well, a minute ago, the captain of the pleasure craft was shouting up at the helicopter, "Get away, get that thing away from my boat." His words were lost in the roar of the engine. Now there are more sounds, shattering glass, screams of panic, and the stutter of 9mm weapons. So there's panic aboard this pleasure yacht. Let's turn the page. And we'll see the helicopter hovering over there and a rope ladder hanging from it too. So obviously people have gone aboard the ship. And here we have one of them saying, "Okay, where's Bruno Pontchartrain? He's the only one we're interested in. And if we get him, nobody else gets hurt." So this is the guy in question. And who's this bearded chap behind him? Well, it turns out to be Matt Murdock, aka Daredevil, and he whispers to Pontchartrain, "You're not a very popular man, Bruno. Thugs who commit murder and get released on technicalities usually aren't. So when that chopper started heading this way, I figured it wasn't bringing more pals to your victory party." So the guy recognizes, or rather, this is an interesting layout and transition here. So how long will it take Matt to remove the fake beard, take off the waiter's clothes, and get into his red Daredevil costume, pulling on his mask? Well, it takes longer than what we would normally expect a transition between this panel and this one to be. So we got to read this as having enough time for him to make that costume change. And it's this guy here off panel who's saying, "You're not a waiter, you're," and then exclaiming Daredevil. So Daredevil swings into action. He's thinking strategically or tactically about the situation. This jolly pair matched the description of the guys who killed Manny Carver and Aces Quartuccio the other mobsters who were murdered after beating the law. So I was right in guessing Bruno might be their next target. So he throws a heavy glass mug, hits the guy in the back of the head, grabs onto the rope ladder hanging down from the chopper. The pilot's decided to abandon his buddies. He thinks to himself, he's revving his engines going up and he's taking me with him. So I like the layout here, these tall vertical panels, 6-panel grid on this particular page. Now what's interesting is Denny O'Neill's decision to include these narrative captions. I don't think they're necessary. Let's have a read of them, and see why that is. With the March wind tearing at him, Daredevil ascends the swaying ladder. That's fair enough. But this one here and this one are a bit too on the nose in respect of what it is we're actually seeing in the art. 1,000 feet below the East River is a hard, cold glint. Directly ahead, the lights of the Brooklyn Bridge spangle the twilight and glisten on the barrel of the submachine gun, now aimed at Daredevil's face. So we can see all that. That's all conveyed, not the specific qualifications of the details, like the spangling lights in the twilight or the glistening light on the barrel of the submachine gun. We can't see that exactly, but do we really need these narrative captions? I think not. Let's continue, get past the advertisements here. And more action. So Daredevil knocks the machine gun out of the guy's hand, and then the pilot loses control of the chopper. He must have fallen against the controls. Chopper's spinning, losing altitude. My radar sense indicates we're heading straight for the bridge. So the helicopter swings, its tail swings into the bridge. Daredevil grabs for the bridge itself like an anchor. It drops, smacks against the water, sinks. And again, do we need those narrative captions? Daredevil here hanging on to the bridge thinks to himself, they'll be lucky if they recover the body. Maybe I'd feel sorry for him if he hadn't just tried to blow my brains out. A lot of mixed emotions about this one. I seem to have ended a murder gang, but I almost wish they'd nailed Bruno before I nailed them. And this is the interesting piece of information here. So this mobster that he saved from being executed, assassinated on the pleasure yacht, he slaughtered a little girl. And then a transition to Matt visiting or going to his offices shared with Foggy Nelson, his law partner, and continuing with his thought transitioning into dialogue with Foggy, mostly because he felt like it, and we got him off because the arresting officer made a minor mistake. So got off on a technicality. Then he had the nerve to rent a boat and throw a victory party and invite us. And Foggy responds and says, we didn't go, did we? And Matt thinks to himself, I did. So nice colours, nice art, nice storytelling. Foggy having a sandwich there, continuing to say to Matt, look Matt, our job isn't to judge these bozos, it's to defend them. We do that any way we can, or we find another line of work. I wasn't happy about taking Bruno as a client, but I didn't see how we could ethically refuse him. So Matt's musing, he's at the window. Of course he's blind, so he's not looking out the window, and he says to Foggy in reply, I know, Foggy, I'm not questioning your motives, and you certainly mounted an effective defense. And then Foggy interrupts him, hey, speaking of parties, you showing up at Netta's penthouse tonight? And Matt says, I don't think so. I heard Heather will be there, and well, I'd rather not meet her yet because their engagement is over. But that evening, there's the penthouse. We have an exterior shot of the penthouse, establishing shot, and then we're inside into the party. There's Heather dressed in a red suit, and there's some chat at the party, and then a man comes over to her, introduces her or asks her, Ms. Glenn, Heather Glenn, and she's drunk. She says, I'm sorry, can't remember your name. I'm such a bubblehead. And he introduces himself. Not at all, we've never met. I'm Tarkington Brown. I'm with the mayor's office. I've never heard of anyone having a first name of Tarkington in my entire life. Does it exist in North America? Is this a name that anyone else has come across? Or is this just made up in order to convey something about the social class and perhaps religious background of this particular figure? In any case, Mrs. Glenn is charmed, and then an hour later in Central Park, except that's off because they're just outside Central Park. So they're walking along the footpath, or sidewalk as Americans call it, on outside the wall of Central Park. But in any case, really like the lighting here in Klaus Janson's colours, and also the decision to have these 4 horizontal panels too, as the 2 characters walk forward towards us. Really like the artistic choice here to have Heather paused under a tree and have the shadows cast by the foliage and branches of the tree over her face, even as she betrays Matt Murdock in her drunken state. She says, "This next thing I shouldn't tell you. You gotta promise never, never to tell another soul, no matter what. It's Daredevil. If only Matt weren't Daredevil, he could accept me. But the hero part of him keeps wanting to protect me, and I need his love, not his protection." And you see the guy there is stunned. That's a good expression on his face in Janson's pencils and inks. Heather, he grabs her by the shoulders. "Let me be certain I understand you. You're saying that Matthew Murdock is Daredevil?" And she replies, "Uh-huh. And that's why it didn't work out for us. You believe me, don't you?" And he says, "Yes, I do. You've had a bit too much to drink to be lying." And then he hails a taxi. And it was Alan Brennert's idea. It was exactly this, that Heather, who's a bit of a drinker and who does get drunk on the regular, would in such a state betray Matt's secret identity and alter ego as Daredevil. And that's an interesting story idea, because of course it's something that in a few years' time Frank Miller would take that idea and translate it to Karen Page, and selling out Matt's secret identity, alter ego as Daredevil, for a hit of heroin after she had become a junkie. So intriguing, isn't it, that Brennert comes up with the idea of a lady love of Matt's revealing his secret identity, in this case also because of an addiction perhaps to alcohol. So we have Tarkington there taking a couple of pills. We'll be making Two Stops Driver. So why is he taking pills? We'll find out. Two Stops Driver. First, we'll drop the lady on the Upper East Side, and then we'll go downtown to a certain hotel near the Fulton Fish Market. So here we are in Lower East Side, looking up there at the Brooklyn Bridge from another perspective than the one we saw earlier. So it's more of a rundown part of Manhattan in the 1980s and the early 80s. So you can see that conveyed in Klaus Janson's art as well. And here in the hotel, in this room, somebody's speaking. He says here, "We're all here," so they're all there. We can, and one of them's missing. We can fill him in later. "Gentlemen, we're in a position to make another contribution." So one of the cops says, "We going to get another shot at whacking out Bruno?" "No, not at this time," says, "It's supposed to be Tarkington. Perhaps in a few weeks. No, our next target is an attorney, Matthew Murdock. Ain't he the partner of that Nelson? That's the shyster who got Bruno sprung," says one of the cops. "The same," says Tarkington. "So why not dust Nelson?" asks the cop. "Gentlemen, when you agreed to work with me on this project, you also agreed not to ask unnecessary questions. Projects similar to ours have been thwarted in the past by too many knowing too much. The so-called murder squad," he continues, "in Argentina and the group in San Francisco, for example. Must I remind you of your vow of obedience to me? Have I failed you yet? Then trust me, Murdoch is a far greater threat to a free society than Nelson." So this is intriguing stuff, because this obviously is Denny O'Neill's plot point that he's adding to Brennert's idea. And the antagonists in this particular story are ultra-conservative or far-right vigilantes. And that very much comes out in the allusion to the murder squad in 1970s Argentina, which was allied to the right-wing government, and the reference there to the group in San Francisco, I think, is an allusion to the Dirty Harry movie Magnum Force, the sequel movie that came out in 1973. And Denny O'Neill, what was his politics? Denny O'Neill, his politics was that of a liberal lefty progressive. So he would explore in certain of his stories the bête noire of liberal lefty progressives, which is of course ultra conservative, hard or far right wing forces. And so it's intriguing thinking about the editor bringing some politics into the story, but it's pretty subtly done. It's not 100% on the nose, but it's there anyway. And it certainly says to me that Denny O'Neil is meditating here, ruminating on the vigilante dimension of Daredevil's superheroic mission in Manhattan. Those two sides of his identity, lawyer, defense lawyer by day, and two-fisted server of justice at night. And he's thinking about it in a political context, or with political contextual allusions, which is intriguing. And again, those Dirty Harry movies in the background too. But the following morning, Heather wakes up and she realizes she's blown it. I betrayed him. I told that guy, what's his name, Matt's secret. And there she is going into a fetal position in her bed. So she's disgusted at herself. Then across town in the offices of Nelson and Murdoch, Foggy says, darndest thing, Matt. The passengers on Bruno's boat swore that the gunmen Daredevil aced were taken ashore by cops. Anyway, Matt, the boys at headquarters have absolutely no record of them being booked or even held. Weird, huh? So there's something going on there, and the information is coming about it. And Heather arrives distraught into the office, and she reveals to Matt that she told Tarkington Brown that you're Daredevil, and she explains she was drunk. I'm sorry, she says, and Matt replies, your being sorry does not exactly do me a fat lot of good. And she replies, she says, you should be happy, Matt. I've proven you were right. I've shown you I'm the brainless little loser you claim I am. What are you going to do about it? Kill me? And that's the point, that if Matt were chivalrous, if he were a different character, he might respond more emolliently than he does, but he turns his back to her and says, get out of here, Heather. And that just reminds me of the darkness of a character like Michael Corleone in the Godfather movies, particularly in the second one, which I've just watched recently. That kind of, how will I put it, like the two sides of certain kinds of men, where they're passionate on the one side but can be quite cold, and it's complementary coldness on the other. And he's just done that with Heather there. So she's gone and he's all business. Becky, get me everything on Tarkington Brown. He's the mayor's computer expert, currently assigned to the police department. Everything, Becky. Love the lighting in here, the shadows cast by the Venetian blinds in the office. A trope of Frank Miller's, but Klaus Janson doing a really good version of it himself. Then we have Tarkington Smith, and he has just had a checkup with his doctor. I'll level with you, Tarky, says the doctor. There's been no change in your condition, but if you'd slow down, you might live an extra year or two. So now we infer that he has a terminal diagnosis, some disease or other, and Heather bursts into his office. We get an exterior shot of it there, which gives Klaus Janson an opportunity to include a billboard sign advertising a camera with the branding Ronin. But what's really intriguing about this, having just mentioned Frank Miller, is Miller's left Marvel to walk across the road to work at DC Comics with the promise of freedom, creative freedom, and also ownership of his next comic entitled Ronin. So Klaus Janson, of course, keeping in touch with Miller, probably seeing the pages from Ronin and giving it a cheeky little signposting there in this particular panel. So then back into the story, Heather's there, she's saying to Tarkington, I lied, I was trying to impress you. There isn't a bit of truth in what I said. It's absurd, in fact, absolute nonsense. But he's not listening to her. He says, I'm convinced every word was true. I ran several checks through the computers and found absolutely no reason why Murdoch couldn't be Daredevil. So of course Heather says the obvious thing, Matt's blind. Tarkington replies, positively brilliant ploy. By pretending to be sightless, he ensures that no one will guess his identity. And then this is very kind of 1970s, early 80s TV series trope where he's got a handgun in the drawer of his office desk. Of course he does. So he pulls it out and he says he's going to kill both of them. You do realize you must die, he says to her as he points the gun at her. You're a bit flighty, but you're not stupid. So when Murdoch is killed today, you're likely to recall what you told me. Matt killed, she asks. Yes, at this moment his assassins are waiting. So let's see. It's the cops. One of them is on the rooftop with a high-power military sniper rifle. That reminds me again of the first Dirty Harry movie, where there was a similar sniper. I think he was called the Zodiac Killer or something like that. A Scorpio Killer, that was it. Scorpio. And he was shooting people in San Francisco. And then there's two inside Matt's house, armed with submachine guns and Magnum revolvers. There we go, Magnum revolvers. That's a reference to Magnum Force, if ever there was one. And a fourth with a poison gas weapon. So that's a colourless, odourless gas which a victim cannot detect until it drops him. So it seems that Tarkington has set the perfect trap for Matt Murdock and he's going to be dead. Daredevil must be eliminated, he says. Meanwhile, the guy on the rooftop, he has his rifle grabbed by Daredevil and he's knocked out with the butt of the rifle. Daredevil jumps off the top of the apartment building. This is a really nice sequence here where he's diving off the top of the building, swinging around the top of a lamppost, and then back on to the rooftop of an adjacent building. And all the while he's thinking to himself, I'm pretty sure the sniper is one of the kill squad who went after Bruno, probably the same crew who've been murdering various other unsavory characters around town. Since I ruined their operation last night and Brown knows who I am, it seems likely he's their leader. So he's putting it together. He races across the rooftop to the skylight doorway and drops down into his own brownstone apartment. He stands still as stone then and concentrates. It's something he does supremely well. For the bizarre childhood accident which deprived him of his sight also greatly increased the power of his remaining senses. And so he determines there are two of them on the ground floor. This is a really nice sequence. Really like this angle here that Klaus Janson has pulled off on Daredevil opening the skylight doorway and dropping down. It's good stuff, that close-up, that almost three-quarter profile close-up on his face there with the radar effect. That's really well done. Like the hatching there, probably with a brush. And there, the house is in darkness, but of course that won't stop Daredevil because of his radar sense. So he takes out one of the guys with the machine gun. The other guy recognizes that Daredevil must be around. Let's continue. Starts shooting at Daredevil. This is a really nice sequence where he dives out the window and he swings himself along the ledge, this ornamental ledge, and kicks his way in through another window right behind the guy with the machine gun. That's fantastic storytelling by Klaus Janson. Really, really well done. Good stuff. And so he's knocked the guy out and then he hears a footstep on the basement stairs. And the radar sense is off again, but this one's armed differently. No submachine gun, a heavy tank on his back, hose, nozzle, gas under tremendous pressure, shooting out as fast as water from a fire hose. And here, Klaus Janson is using a 1980s craft technique, duo shade. And so what's distinctive of duo shade is you get these two different values of grey, a light grey and a dark grey there. That would all be done with a brush. Looks really good on the newsprint. He's using it again here for the gas in the background of these first three panels on the page. So smartly, Daredevil uses the gas mask of one of the machine gunners now to get that one outside before the gas affects him, because of course Daredevil's a hero and he doesn't want the man dying. And so outside there are a couple of beat cops. Should I trust them? Thinks Daredevil to himself. They could be with the murder squad. I suppose I have to, unless I want to drag this killer around with me. If I get Brown, I can get the lot of them. So off he runs, he trusts the cops. And back at Brown's office, Soon my associates should phone to say the business with Murdoch, or if you prefer Daredevil, is concluded. Then I shall be forced to conclude my business with you, he says. And she replies, why me? I'm not a criminal. I'm not one of your scum of the earth. I'm an innocent bystander. I'm as innocent as anyone. And he replies, true, but unfortunately you are in the way. You're in a position to interfere, as is Daredevil. Therefore, to my great regret, you must be eliminated. So, basically, Heather's luck is out. It's nothing personal. It's all about his mission of making a contribution before he dies. And politely, he offers her some coffee. And she gets the idea, which, did you get it as well? To basically throw it in his face. So Heather's got some spirit, which of course is what attracted Matt to her in the first place. And she runs out of his office yelling for help. He's about to shoot her in the back when of course Daredevil arrives. He says to him, I'll ask the questions. I've only one. Why? Why try to ice me? We're on the same side. And Tarkington says, excuse me, no, we're not. You're on their side. The weaklings. You see the problem, but you don't have the courage to solve it. Not you, not the politicians, not the police. There's a war and we're losing. And the punks and the terrorists and the hoodlums are winning. There's only one solution. Be more ruthless than they are. Eliminate them, kill them. In the process, you're willing to kill people like Heather? Asks Daredevil. And Tarkington replies, there are always civilian casualties in a war. And what's Daredevil's response? He says, that's the kind of cheap jack excuse men like you always use to justify their own insanity. So this really is pointed here. Daredevil, under Denny O'Neill's pen, has a line. And this is the line. You're a Looney Tune, Tark. You're round the bend. What got you started on your grand crusade anyway? So then he explains, the doctors say I've only a few months to live. I want to make a contribution. I want to make this city a better place to live in. So that gets Daredevil's attention. And he's thinking and says, I'll offer you a deal. You keep quiet about my identity and I'll keep your secret. Until I die, eh? Asked Tarkington. That's right. If I read about myself in the morning paper, I'll know you blew the whistle on me. I'll return the favor by blowing it on you. Louder, much louder. So here is the point of mirroring, where Tarkington, insofar as he only attacks hoodlums and has them eliminated, Daredevil is prepared to leave him alive, only with concern for his own secret identity. So that's intriguing. And last page, and this is a superb ending to this 22-page story, the twist that comes at the end here. Early the following day, so it's in Nelson and Murdoch's offices, legal offices, and Foggy's there at his desk, and he says, police ballistics linked the guns of the guys to the mob killings. They're the murder squad. They're finished. And Matt thinks to himself, great, and Brown better not replace them. And Foggy says there, oh Maddie, that was the good news. I've got some bad news too. I'll tell you after lunch. Matt says, for pity's sake, Foggy, if you've something to say, say it. And Foggy says, remember Bruno, the guy I got off on the technicality? And then this is fantastic. He killed another little girl this morning. And then just a final silent panel as Matt sits down at his own desk, his head in his hands. And that is the ending to this little moral puzzle story. What if he'd let those guys kill Bruno on the boat? That other little girl wouldn't be dead this morning. So there it is. So if he sticks to his moral code, his ethical code, bad things happen. Bad things happen indeed. What a great little story. Next, Wolverine. So I will be reviewing that one, of course. One page of letters there. And there you go. I do hope that you enjoyed this review and commentary on Daredevil 195. Let me know your thoughts on this one in the comment section. If you enjoyed my review and commentary, please like and share the video. It really does help the channel. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more content like this.